Yo, what's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing?
Doing well, thank you. Is this a test or is this the actual thing we're doing at the moment?
Well, this is live, but this is a test.
A live test. Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to figure all this out. Question widget. I'm gonna make sure the chat widget works okay. What's going
Oh,
on?
there's some interesting echo going on. Is that because of me?
Yes, my bad. Okay, try it now. Wait, no, that was me.
Hello, how about now? Any echo?
No echo now.
Good one. Okay, this is going to be one of those exciting things where we make some mess and we... Oh, I'm still echoing. Still echoing, Tim.
How are you still?
Stop me echoing.
Tim's audio's... Well, of course my audio's good. Okay. Oh, they said perfect.
Oh, I know. There we go. Let me just mute the fact that I'm watching myself with a 10-second delay over on my other screen. That could be part of the issue. Rick, yeah, Egypt.
Okay, I had to perfect the text chat, so now people are on text. So remember, this is video, people. Your chat is on the screen. That means you got to have a certain level of respect, a little bit tighter controls than we do on Discord. You know,
Dude, that is brave.
I got
Really,
moderator control.
That's a big level of responsibility. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Rick's chat on screen, but you guys, we can trust you guys.
That
right?
hurts.
Yeah, so we're just
The glare off my forehead. Who is the rude? Hang on a minute. I'm trying to read the comments here. What's going on? There's a delay on chat to the vid.
Yeah, there is a delay. That's intentional, so I can mod people if they start saying something bad about my hair or my beard. You know.
How do you do that though? Because isn't it still going to come up? There's a delay, like 10 seconds, where you're like, oh my god, in 10 seconds time, that person's going to have an eggplant emoji on the screen.
Yeah, I can in the back end. I can delete it or ban them or do whatever.
Oh, dude, you've got the. How do I get these controls?
If you go in the account, you can go to the control panel.
Oh, that's beyond my skill set.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll play with that. I'll play with that if I get bored with what you're talking about. And possible.
Yeah, so right now we're chilling, we're trying to do some audio tests, but everyone in chat, audio and video looks good. Like there's no lag or latency or other than the chat. You guys can hear us okay, both of us. And then I'm gonna make sure in Q&A live channel. Oh, you look at you, Rick. You already have it all good to go.
What do I have on?
Oh, you already did the announcement and the chat thing. So.
Oh yeah. On your OBS, Tim, are you able to make your window bigger, your us window? Because what I see is your OBS that's got us in the middle, and then the chat, and then all your recording and whatever. Yeah, just
make it bigger.
And so I'm squinting at this tiny little.
So when I show my screen, I'll move this over, so you won't be able to see this anymore. But do you have the chat somewhere else?
Oh yeah, I've got the chat. I don't need to see your chat.
Oh, you're just trying to see us?
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I assume at some point you're going to share the screen, and I'll be looking at it like, "What are you showing there, Tim Rushwick?"
Okay.
I got 3 monitors, but that doesn't help when it comes to having tiny things on the screen. So
I don't have a green screen. I have a white screen. I'm trying to set up my whole thingy. I'm not as fancy as Rick yet. I'm trying to get my whole setup.
Fancy. You know what? Where this is going to hurt some people. Brace yourself for some sort of technological pain on what we're about to say. The way to do this setup smoothly in OBS to be able to stream it with 2 people and both their feeds coming in is to use Skype.
Of all things.
Of all things. And with Skype, I'm like, oh, cool, I'll do some green screen. And I did green screen, and I got this massive green halo around me and then this awful background. And so I'm looking at it going, what's wrong with you, Skype? So, I might be able to fix that. There might be some sort of Skype magic or some external plugin that some frustrated developer has created to change that up. But for now, I'm just going to go with green. Maybe I'll play around with it later on if I'm bored.
Yeah, I was not on board with Skype, but it has a thing called NDI, which we can use to capture the feeds directly. Otherwise, you do this weird like screen capture thing, but it has to stay like in a certain spot of your screen, and it's all like MSN. Are we going down internet glory days now? AOL chat, AOL chat rooms.
Can we do a test to see the lag between us asking a thing and then it showing on our chat? I think you're showing it in your chat feed differently. So anyway, let me just see if I can figure this out. So um, when I say where are you from, this is the worst setup ever. I'm so nervous. People can see me now. I can't sit here picking my nose and looking up and being like,
Don't do anything
oh,
weird.
it's so boring. I actually have to pay attention. Oh my God. Okay. Well, it's not like we haven't been on camera before, so we can do this, Tim. We got it.
It's been a while
Okay.
though, right? Like
It
it
has
seems
been a
harder
while.
now for whatever reason.
So let me ask you guys a question. Where are you from? There we go. Feel free to answer that right now. Where are you from? And we'll see the delay. Um,
It's a good 10 seconds, 10 15 seconds at least.
although are people asking it because they knew what I was answering it because they knew what I was going to ask? I don't know. Five
Well,
or
you
10 seconds.
said if I ask you where you're from, and then you
And
said
then
it
people are
later.
like, oh, here's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
So,
kind of messed up that whole. You got to ask him a weird question, like what's
you
better,
know,
Unity or Unreal?
oh, maybe we'll ask the question. So, what's the name of the dog that features in the GameDev.tv
Are they
livecast
just
every
guinea
week?
pigs for our questions now? We switched to video and we just
That's the only reason everyone is here, just to answer our questions.
drag
Okay.
dog.
So this is good, Tim. This is fun.
Yeah,
So far, so good. I'm enjoying myself, being able to see you. It's been a while since I last saw you
very long time.
yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, but I think we can start. We got a big section on the beginning of this of just hanging out. But you guys aren't here for the quick, succinct, packed, full of content value. You're here for a little bit of back and forth.
A little bit of banter. You're recording this, right? Like this is all magically taken care of with the mystery of YouTube, and there's no more
Yes,
me remembering to hit record. Oh, glory
it's
days.
going to YouTube in the cloud. It's gonna sit on the cloud, which is pretty
Nice.
great. Yeah. So today, first of all, welcome everybody to the Devology, our first video one. Today we're going to talk about how to make your game look pretty without being an artist, and we thought that it would be good on our first video to be able to utilize the video format and show you some cool video stuff of some of the games and aesthetics and artist stuff that we're all looking at, and we can all kind of look at the same thing rather than just link in chat and just say go look at it yourself. We can kind of show you exactly what we mean and what we're talking about. Uh, I'm
That sounds
ex-
like a new dimension, Tim. A new dimension to actually being able to show the thing that you're talking about. Instead,
Yeah,
yeah,
this is
I
high tech. Like
like
nobody has really done live video streaming before, so we're like on the cutting edge of technology
of
here.
Skype, cutting edge of Skype.
We've officially downloaded Skype. It's gonna be
Hey, you
great.
guys, there's this new chat thing called Skype. You're gonna love it.
It's yeah, it's Microsoft
How
will
good's
not ruin it.
OBS though? I want to take a moment before you talk about the stuff you actually want to talk about. Sorry to do this to you. Is the amount of free stuff, software, tools, open source, etc., that's out there nowadays. I mean, we have a lot of courses teaching Blender, and Blender is just like, go get it, go use it, go do whatever you want with it. OBS as well. It's magic. The fact that we can just hook it up, plug it in, get it going, and it's working like a charm. So lucky in
OBS,
today's day and age.
we yeah, OBS and Blender are great examples of open source software that's just it's better than like even the paid alternatives. It's been worked on for so long. It's got so many contributors that like people don't start from scratch anymore if they're building these kinds of software. They start with some of that code because it's just so solid. I would never use anything other than OBS. It's great. It's got so many things. I'm still discovering stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, so that being said, Rick, before we jump to screen cap and show a little bit of kind of some aesthetics and some design stuff and artistry stuff, do you think there's any general rule or any kind of at least cheat code or thing that you can use to make your game look pretty without being an artist?
You threw me for a second with the terminology cheat code because I'm thinking of, oh, what's the actual cheat code?
Down,
Okay,
left,
so
right, A, B, X, Y, start.
exactly. Is there a button on the controller you can make your game look better? Tim, I didn't know about this. You know what? Well, we talk about it all the time. I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but asset packs. I think we're talking about beginner game developers. We're talking about indie game developers. We're talking about people who have some ideas, have some passion, have some programming skills, but aren't necessarily an artist, right? Different to triple A. The secret in triple A is you hire another 200 people. That's how you make your game look better. But when it comes to indie, I think starting with an asset pack and then modifying that asset pack so that it looks different to the asset pack, adding a shader or two. So finding some plugins or finding some asset pack shaders to make it look a little bit different, have your own flavor to it, I think is good. There's a little bit of magic. And okay, so there's a couple of things. Am I in the right ballpark?
Yeah, I mean,
You didn't brief me on this. I feel like this is gonna be one of the like turning up like what are we doing here? Oh my goodness, there's an exam.
Video it seems so much harder. But I just Googled asset packs and I'm looking on the Unity asset store right now. And I think if I was gonna make a beach and I wanted to make a low poly beach, like why would I go through all of the effort to like hire an artist and do all that stuff when I have like all of this stuff to work from? It doesn't necessarily mean that I need to just like copy it and use it exactly in my game because my game might look like someone else's game. But I could at least start with some of this stuff, right? Like you can, the license on this stuff lets you download it and modify it in any way. You can change the color palettes, the materials. You can change the mesh. If you get something like Pro Builder too, you can like tweak stuff super easily in engine. Why would you not kind of start with an easier, especially if you're not an artist, right? Like if you're an artist, you want to do the stuff from scratch. Like that's part of what you want to do. But if you're not an artist, like how else can you get stuff like this for $35, you know?
I think there's a real misconception as well amongst the game development community that feels that using asset packs is cheating and that we're depriving the player of some sort of amazing experience because those assets have been used somewhere else before. But as a player, I don't see that. When I play games, I don't look at those games and think, oh, that's just an asset pack. Come on, you can do better than that. I don't care if it's a good game. You know, if I'm playing a game that's got Cinti assets in it and it's really interesting and compelling and giving me an experience of and challenge, I don't care. So I think we're preaching to the choir a little bit with this community because I think as beginner indie game developers or game developers, we know these things. We know it intuitively that we don't need to stress about that. But I just want to reiterate that there's nothing wrong with asset packs. And if some sort of person out there on Reddit says, you're using an asset pack, you suck, it's like, don't worry about it. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Forget about it. So someone brings up a good question. They said that if a lot of times they don't use asset packs because there's might be a part missing that they need and it gets complicated. Do you have any solutions for that?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good challenge. I think it's good to know a little bit of, for example, Blender, so you can get there and tweak things.
Right.
So, for example, the asset pack might have 3 characters, but you need a 4th character. That's when you can get there and modify it. You know, stretch it around, change the colors, etc. If it's low poly, it's easier to do that than if it's super, professional. I think that's when you can also pay for that artist when you've already got an art style determined because you're using an asset pack that you love, but maybe it's only got 80% of the assets. You can team up with someone or you can pay a contractor and say, here's the style, make me 3 more of those things. And because the style is very, very obvious, it's an easier process then to make that, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. One of the things that
or learn how to do it yourself. Sorry to interrupt on that.
Yeah.
Do you want to make 100% of the assets or do you want to make 10% of the assets? So, asset packs are rarely going to give you absolutely everything you need. So there is still a little bit of a knowledge. So we're not talking about don't make anything yourself. We're talking about don't make all of the things yourself.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important in kind of this whole aesthetic conversation is that you need to kind of understand what you want to do in game development. So like if you really want to learn art and you want to learn how to design some of this stuff, it's not going to hurt you to learn it. And it's going to take a bunch of extra time, but it's a skill that you want to learn, right? If you, on the other hand, want to make a game and art is kind of in the way as your deal, then it's going to be a problem, right? Like it's going to be an issue if what you want to do is make a game and you got to make a bunch of art. So it's important to kind of think about that from a perspective of like what you want to do. Now, if you're okay with doing some of your art, there are a lot of programs out there. There are a lot of ways that you can make simple assets. One of them, I think, what's that one called that I showed you, Rick? With the Kenny made it, Asset Forge, I think it's called.
Asset Forge, yeah, Asset Forge.
Speaking of, let me show that because we got video.
Yeah,
now.
We can show it now. Oh my
Look
goodness!
at us. I was trying to show.
I'm still a bit, still
Asset
getting used to this whole.
Yeah, forgive us because we're kind of still figuring all this out.
But we've only been doing this for 10 years. Forgive us for being like, "What's a stream?"
It's been a while.
You know what? Okay. You know what I am. What I'm missing in here is it's going to be a little bit trickier to catch people's questions because the chat in this mechanism is not quite as good as when we're doing this through Discord.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little more complicated. But okay.
Actually, that's a question for folks. Would you rather we use the Discord chat or the YouTube chat? The Discord chat's a little bit disconnected, but has a few bells and whistles. Yeah. Anyway, so Tim, you were going to show us Asset Forge.
Asset Forge, this is a program that basically gives you a bunch of little pieces, like flat pieces, round pieces, triangle pieces, all kinds of different stuff, and you can basically just drag and drop it. I own it, but I don't have it installed right now. But it's a great little program because even if you're not an artist, you can kind of slap stuff together. And like with castles, for example, you can build. You could here's a car. For example, you start with some basic parts, and it's got a whole folder for like vehicles, right? So you can just kind of pull this stuff together and make your own stuff. And if you get asset packs or things like that are similar to this kind of style, it's really easy to pop something together. Like you don't have to model everything from scratch, right? The other part of that too is to always use a reference. A lot of people, when they get into art for the first time and they don't know what they're doing, they think automatically that they're just trying to make a car, but they do it without ever looking at a low poly car or whatever they're trying to make. And if you actually just sit down and stare at it while you're making your model, you can have much better results by just constantly looking at one that you're using for reference, right? So Asset Forge is a cool little program that I would highly recommend if you're not an artist, but you want to kind of piece stuff together. Obviously, there's a similar style that you need to stick to if you don't know how to make your own pieces for it. But
I think also sorry, Tim. Putting on my producer hat for a moment, because I worked as a producer for a number of years in the games industry, and you're always looking for efficiency. What's the scope? How do we do this quicker or better? How do we take shortcuts? How many people do we need? And so I think from an indie perspective, the production hat that I'm putting on at the moment is if you're working on your game and you're using placeholder art, cubes and the default skybox, which drives me insane. Right. Please change the default skybox as soon as you start your project. It immediately will feel different and better and interesting. But two things here. One, if you're working on your game and you put in some just quick, free or low cost asset store assets, immediately I think your game has more credibility in your own mind because it looks good. The car you were just showing, you've got that driving around instead of having a cube driving around. And I think immediately you take your game a lot more seriously. So that's good in the very early stage of it. It's also, if you're using asset store assets, to take your game to the point where you've discovered the joy, discovered the fun, discovered the experience, and players can feel that. So they're driving the car around, they're smashing into things, there's explosions, you've got particle effects, and they're like, this is pretty cool. Yeah. And then if they're enjoying that, if you think that you've got you got something on your hands here, I think this game could really be something, then you can go to the effort of switching out the assets with something that's more expensive or fancier that you create yourself, or investing the time and effort into having it really shine. But I think you don't necessarily want to have that go through that process until you know that your game is worthy of putting that time and cost and effort into.
Yeah. 100% agree. I think the only other part of this that I think is super important to keep in mind, especially when you're making your own assets. Sorry, I was messing with the colors. I did the wrong color on chat.
Stop it. Cut it out.
Um,
That's why we don't make our own assets. We
this
just sit
is
there, well, maybe it's a green, or maybe it's a light green, or maybe it's a dark green.
so the other part of that is color palettes, right? And this is something that I've learned in kind of making my art as a non-artist. Is everybody kind of has heard of color palettes and stuff before, but they just kind of they look at stuff like this, that's shades of color, and your game will look automatically 100 times better if you pick a palette like this that has been curated and that looks good, and you have it kind of sitting there where, okay, you know all these colors match and go together. But what a lot of people don't get is stuff like this. So this is an image, and it's just a photo of, it looks like maybe Utah or something like that, or some country that I'm not aware of. That maybe that's not Utah.
Did you say? Wait. Did you just say maybe it's Utah or some country I'm not aware of? Were you mixing up your? Anyway, don't. Let's not have this turn into a Tim back.
Utah looks like this minus the snow. Okay, there's quite a bit and maybe some less grass, but I confused it for a second.
Sure.
But so this is a color palette that's a breakdown of this photo, which is really cool. Now you can take this a step farther, right? So you can say, let's say you like, this is something I did for my gnome game. I looked at, if you look at like garden, cartoon game, for example, just
dude, you prepared for today's live stream. Good on you. This is unusual for us to have some stuff prepared. Nice work.
But if you look at this, here's the cool thing about this. A lot of people don't realize that they can pull a palette from a screenshot that they like. So if you find something like this that looks really, really good together, like this.
How do you do that, Tim? How's that? Do you put it through a tool, or do you chuck it in Photoshop? Tell me, educate me.
So I'm looking at this photo. I really, really like how this looks. Everything looks balanced. You know what I mean? Like even the reds, they don't pull too much from the green, even though it's like, you know, it's a really color that should pop. The browns blend well. So I really, really like this, which is a little bit different than this, which is like very saturated, right? So, but let's say that I really, really like that one photo, this one. I can pull this into Photoshop and I can make a palette of it. So there's actually services that I can actually use. So color
or GIMP if you don't have Photoshop and you don't want to subscribe to Adobe's subscription machine, then GIMP is just as valid.
Yeah. So this site coolers.co/image picker will allow you to upload an image and it will give you a palette from it. So I can actually take this image that I found, which I really, really like, and I can put it in here and I can export the palette and it will give me a nice, cool little palette. Which that's the easy way to do it.
What was that site?
It's coolers.co/image picker, but I literally just Googled it.
Cool. Is that someone sitting there who's like, damn it, all the good color URLs have been taken already. Let's make it coolers.
Let's do this.
I don't know if anyone else has felt that pain of like, oh, I've got an idea. I'm going to go see if the website's available. No, not that one, not that one, not that one. Oh, look, that's really handy. This has been the worth the price of admission right here. coolers.co/image-picker. Nice.
So now this is the simplified way to do it, right? But you notice there's a lot more subtlety than this type of palette gives me. And I can actually drag, I've never used this tool before, but this is cool kind of showing this off. But it shows all the different palettes for all the different images. But the way that I like to do it is I actually pull this into Photoshop. And as I'm designing stuff, let's say I'm designing a tree, I'll pull the 3 green colors off of a tree, for example. Like, I'll show you how I do this. But so you see there's darker colors and there's lighter colors, right? So there's like darker kind of outlines and then there's lighter like highlights. So shadows and highlights are important because you need a darker and a lighter color on top of each other to make it look like it's depth, like deeper, right? So let me, where's that image that I just pulled? So I'll just drag that in there. So as I'm designing, I'll just straight up grab this like color picker tool right here and just be like, oh, okay, there's like a darker green, there's like a lighter green, and all that. Oh, I need a brown. Okay, there's a darker brown, there's a lighter brown. And I'll keep track of these colors so that every time I use a darker brown, I'll use this same darker brown, whatever I pick. But I find that if I do it manually, I can kind of blend them a little bit better. So like you see, there's a darker red and there's a lighter red on both sides of the mailbox. Those are the shadows and the highlights. And then here, there's actually 3 shades. It looks like the dark, the light, and then the highlight, right? So with this, I can basically make a game that looks coherent because I used a color palette from somebody way smarter than me. You know what I mean? Like somebody that knows what they're doing as far as like images and stuff goes. And so it is a little advanced if you don't know what you're doing as far as like art goes. But the cool part about it is that colors are like the most significant thing about all of that. And we talked about asset packs and mixing asset packs and making your own assets. A lot of times when people make their own assets to try and fit an asset pack, the number one thing they get wrong is the colors and the materials, right? So if you straight up just you make your own model, but you pull some of the materials from the asset pack and you use some of the same exact colors in the same exact ways, it'll look way more coherent, even if it's a different type of like 3D modeling style, if that makes sense. Because it looks so much more consistent.
It does. And sorry, Tim, I didn't listen for a little bit there because I was over on Discord telling the people sitting in the live voice channel. It's like 15 people sitting there like, when's this thing going to start? I was just telling them, hey, come over to YouTube. We're hanging out with the cool kids today. So if anyone's joined us from that Discord voice lounge, thank you for coming over and finding us over here. Apologies.
We figured it would be a problem.
And it's also exciting that this happens right after the daylight savings change. So some people are like, hang on, wait a minute. Like, where were you guys an hour ago? Or I don't know which way it's going to happen. So exciting. Exciting.
The one last little tip about the color palette image thing too is you can actually take a screenshot of whatever asset pack you bought and load the color palette off of that as well. So you can start adding stuff, or you can just drag the materials directly. So it's super, super important. But yeah, that's the main thing I think a lot of people get wrong. Wouldn't you say that, Rick, when they try to make their own stuff or add stuff to asset packs or mix asset packs is just the color palette?
Yeah, having them work together. Absolutely. And it's a little bit, if you've got say 3 asset packs, then if you've got your color palette, then you can learn a little bit. You don't have to learn all of the things about being an artist. You can learn a little bit just to go in and change the palette, switch it around. And that takes a little bit of investigation to learn how to do that, particularly if the asset was created in a way where you have to dig to find how it's referencing the color or it's how it's mapped, etc. But you can absolutely do that. There's a little bit of learning, but that will allow you to have things look a little, well, have them look like they belong in the same universe, which is really important.
Yeah. And two, like if you use Unity, I'm not sure how it works in Unreal because I don't have a lot of experience in Unreal, but like in Unity, if you know what color your primary color is, it's not hard to make a material of that color. So you could actually go back over an asset pack that you bought with and make a few materials for your different colors in your color palette and just assign those materials, make materials with those colors and then assign the materials to all the assets you bought. So then it looks coherent and it looks stylized too. That's another part, which I think is the next big thing that we're going to talk about is stylization versus just making it look good. So let me pull some stuff up. So what does stylized mean to you, Rick? Like what do you think of when I say stylized?
I usually think it means not realistic in its proportions or its colors or its shape. So to have something that has exaggerations to it, and isn't trying to mimic the shapes and dimensions of the real world. It's
exactly.
But it's not like you can go really extreme with your stylization to the extent where it becomes abstract, we'll say.
Right.
So, it's, using shapes for, instead of actually using objects, like a lot of those mobile games where you're a triangle jumping along. That I think is not stylized, that's abstract. But yeah, having the stylized, it usually also means having a flair to it, I think.
Yeah. So in this screenshot, I believe this is, Journey. So obviously look at the color palette, first of all, right? We just talked about color palette, but this is a perfect example of using a color palette. And the color palette works with kind of the art to make it feel stylized. And even like the way that this character is shaped, like it's different than a traditional character might be in a game, right? And because of that, it's got its own kind of style. And when you mix kind of shapes with the right colors, and you really make them your own, you end up with really cool stuff that looks like this. And I guarantee you, if you find some really cool colors, generally if you pick shades of the same color, you can come up with a really cool palette. Like this, these are all shades of browns and reds, right? With a little bit of grays in there, but even the grays are very brownish. You can pick colors to do this. The other way that I've cheated before. Let me see if you can even tell this. But in my game Battleborn Tactics, before I started realizing that this was so important, I was working really hard on the consistency of these colors, right? I was trying to make everything match. But the problem, I was using these really dark outlines. So you know what I did? You can't actually tell, but over the top of this entire game board, I've just added a slightly transparent brown image. That's all I did. I added brown over the top of it. And you can tell. So this has the brown added on it, and this doesn't. And you can see slightly how just this looks a little less coherent, I think, with all this stuff here. Whereas this whole thing looks much more balanced to me. Anyway, and some of that is subjective too, but it was just something I thought was worth noting. So stylization is extra kind of interesting because it takes regular aesthetics and it kind of makes your game pop, right? Like your character doesn't exactly have to look like a human. They can have exaggerated features, like you were saying, Rick, exaggerated heads.
Yep.
They can do all kinds of weird stuff to make your game stand out and make it look pretty. I've seen some stuff where they take like 2D pixel characters and put them in 3D worlds and stuff like that. Like this doesn't even look human at all, right? Like, that's very stylized. Actually, this is a great example too. Tabs, they've got a low poly style, but they also kind of, the movement of the characters kind of sticks to the crazy physics walks and stuff like that. So it's like very comedic. But there's a lot of good stuff here, I think. Yeah. But how are we doing so far? Is everybody learning stuff? Is this the kind of stuff you guys came for how to make a game look pretty?
Dude, I love this. I'm just trying to troubleshoot some technical stuff. I've got someone on Discord saying that they can't see the YouTube chat. I assume, do you need to be logged in to see that, or
No,
can
the
you?
browser might be too small.
Yeah, it might be. Is there a, because often when you're on your mobile device, you can't see the history of the chat necessarily.
Yeah, you know
So
what?
maybe if anyone, I was going to say, if anyone in chat has some advice for people who can't see chat, they can read that. Then I realized, Rick, how can people see that if they can't see the chat? So
I can give the actual link to the chat in Discord.
oh, there's a link to the chat.
Yeah, if you pop
Okay.
out the chat, you can tell it.
Oh.
Link to chat.
Oh yeah, I see. Gotcha. Cool.
So,
Yeah, and thanks for everyone who's watching and giving us a chance to work through this troubleshooting, this tech stuff. Some things you only figure out when you do these things live.
yeah.
So Tim, we're looking at stylized. So I love this stylized artwork, and there's a little bit of, if I go get my asset pack, it's not going to look stylized. It's not going to look
Right.
different and nifty and exciting. And I think that can be frustrating because when you compare yourself to a game that's had someone work on for a year or two to make the art, it can be frustrating. So I think it is, in the early days, if you're not yet ready to invest the big time in your game, it is about cheating, I think. It is about putting the filters, doing post-processing. It's about, doing some tweaks to it, changing your lighting, changing your the way you apply to that, making the whole thing monochromatic. So looking for those quick ways of making it look different or stylized or interesting, rather than just going into what you had just a moment ago on your screen was, here's this beautiful village that a really skillful 3D artist has obviously taken a lot of, not Asset Forge, but the other thing. I
Sorry, I
don't know if
messed
you've
you up.
closed it down, but whatever you were searching for a moment ago. Um, and that takes a long time to do.
Yeah,
And I think as well, there's an argument for saying, well, look for things where you can get asset pack for the filler. So for your trees and for your
yeah,
ground and for your world and for your houses, and then for, I don't know, for the cars, maybe get someone to help you work on that, or take some time to figure out how to make those in a stylized way.
yeah. The on the flip side of that, Rick, too, a lot of asset packs are stylized. Like Cinti, we talked about before, has a very stylized kind of feel to a lot of their
Low
stuff.
poly feel, yeah.
Right. So part of the problem can be the stylization. Is it so, especially something like Cinti, who gets a lot of quite a few sales and people recognize their assets, right? Because they're using a lot of games.
Mm.
Their stylization could actually be the problem, right? Like they're recognizable because of that stuff. So removing some of the stylization can be important in that, and you can do that with materials, and you can do that with small tweaks and stuff like that to
Can
a lot
you,
of the
Tim?
stuff.
Can you go to the Unreal marketplace? Let me go here as well. I wonder if I can share my screen. Let's not dance with that
Uh,
devil just yet.
yeah, that's a tech hurdle.
Do that at some point. Um, because I think Unreal has really different standard
Yeah,
of assets, and they're more expensive. It's interesting. You can get, oh, here's a cool asset pack on Unity for $20, and here's a similar kind of asset pack for $89 on Epic Marketplace. So it's a little bit different, the price, but you can you can get the assets from the Unreal Marketplace, and look at the terms and services of them. Some say you can only use this in an Unreal game, and which I guess, but
yeah,
others you can just take the assets, and then with a little bit of technical knowledge, you can put them into, if using Godot or using Unity or using something else, you can have those assets cross-populate. So it's if you're finding that you're not getting that range or that particular look or the particular style that you want in the Unity asset store, Unreal has some good stuff. A lot of the free stuff, a lot of the free assets in the Epic Marketplace, I think, have specified you can only use this in an Unreal game. But if you pay for it, I'm pretty sure if you pay for assets from any of these marketplaces, you can use them anywhere. They can't say they wouldn't limit you for where you could use them
yeah.
for paid stuff.
There's a lot of extra websites too, like Turbo Squid. I know is one of them. There's a bunch of other where you can just buy models. If you're
Yeah.
looking for a specific thing, and that it tends to be more expensive, right? Like a lot of the stuff is expensive. But what tip that Kindred said a few weeks ago when he was on our livecast is a lot of times he'll find a model for like a crab or whatever that'll have all the animations, and he'll just kind of delete the mesh and model his own crab over the animations, and then like
Mm,
re-rig it. So like he gets kind of what he needs out of it because animations take long for him, and then he
yeah.
just makes a quick low poly kind of thing to match his style with the animations. So like whatever takes a long time for you, just figure out a way to kind of cut that out, right? Because it's not necessarily about how do you get all the stuff or some of the stuff or whatever. It's just about like where do you want to cut the corners? Because whatever takes you super long to do and you don't enjoy it as much, that's probably where you want to buy stuff, right? Because it makes a lot of sense to do that if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Cool.
I don't think all of this has to do with buying stuff, though. I want to clarify. We spent a lot of time in the asset store and
So
talking about
let's talk
asset
about
packs.
making stuff a
Yeah,
little bit as well. I mean, this is the beauty of having Grant Abbott on our team, is he's made a couple of spectacular courses now. The low poly courses that we have, the low poly landscape and low poly character courses, where you can get there and figure out how to make those, the assets similar to the Cinti assets that we talk about, because we love those guys and they've allowed us to use their assets in a number of our courses, in our projects. So we're a big fan of Cinti. We're also a big fan of being able to make it yourself, because obviously that's what we do. We teach people how to do these things themselves. So if you look at in that course, over the course of, what is it, a 5-hour course, It's one of our smaller ones, so you can get in there, make a thing, and get good at it quickly. So it's just a handful of hours, and you can create. I'm not sure if what I'm. Oh, there we go. Uh, you can create something, get a feel for the style, and say, okay, I've made one house. Now I'm going to just tweak it a little bit. Stretch this out, change the roof a
Yeah.
little bit. Instead of a window here, put the window there. And now I've got a second house, and I did that myself. I just made two houses. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lift off the roof. I'm going to change the base of it and have different
Yeah.
walls. Now I've made a third house. And before you know it, and you now know how to do these things, so you can make a sign out the front. Boom, it's a tavern. Okay, I'm going to make, instead of a fountain, I'm going to make this a rock pond. And so very, very quickly, I think in terms of real time, over the course of a week of working on this,
Yeah.
sitting down each day working on this, you can have yourself a fully modeled little village that you made entirely yourself. And all it took was just going through that, 5-hour Blender course. So
Right.
I'm not trying to pitch the Blender course, but obviously there's many different ways to learn Blender. This is one of them, but it's, I think, a really valid approach for those of us who are looking to do game jams or looking to make our game look a little bit better. You can learn how to do that in Blender.
Yeah. I've considered doing some of that too, because I've done a lot of 2D art now. Like I have a card game and stuff like that, and I've made a lot of 2D games. But I'm finding that 3D art, and maybe this is relevant to this conversation too. 3D art can kind of, it takes a similar amount of time to make. If you're not going like full high res Unreal Engine, like, see all the individual beard hair strands. But like low poly versus 2D art takes a similar amount of time to make. But it's got a lot of advantages because you can get a lot of perspectives. If you draw something in 2D, you drew it from a specific perspective. So 3D can kind of give you a full range of perspectives. It can help move the camera around. So I do think when you're looking at your art, you have to figure out kind of where you want 2D or 3D, and generally you pick that pretty quickly in your game design. But it's important because 3D has a number of advantages to it that 2D doesn't have, and vice versa, right? So, but what I'm seeing a lot lately is there are people that are using their 3D assets, they're making 3D assets, and then they are screenshotting them basically to use as 2D sprites, because the 3D model they can spin at any angle and any perspective, and
Yeah.
they're basically getting the advantages of 3D and 2D at one time. So it's kind of interesting because that's a way to kind of cut corners too. But the other part of that too is like if you know 3D art and you're making a 2D game, you don't necessarily have to like do all of the hard stuff and learn all the 2D art and stuff like that. You can cut corners like that, right? Like you can make some 2D sprites out of your 3D models and just think a little bit outside of the box and find ways to kind of cut corners and make stuff pretty without actually doing all the work. Because games take plenty of time on their own without a bunch of added time
Yeah.
and expenses.
And it's really, I can't overestimate or overemphasize the impact of just spending an hour to tweak your lighting and put in a bit of post processing and have things lined up, like do some set dressing. Here's a tree, here's another tree, here's a barrel, here's a whatever. That part's a little bit longer than an hour, but if that's a 3D game, if it's a 2D game, then just to make sure you've got enough stuff going on in your world and the right amount of stuff. So some games need to be very have a lot of space in them, very open, very very sparse, if you will. That's the intention of the game. Other games need to be busy. There needs to be a lot of assets in there. So if you've got the same thing repeating over and over and over, it can be a little bit samey. You might say,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's just have a second and third asset. So I've got that, and so that's important. And there's a massive importance in the reusability. So I'm a huge fan of modular assets. So you can, here's 3 elements, and I can turn those 3 elements into
Right.
20 different things by changing their positioning, scaling them up, changing the color. And this is an indie approach that I think we should all embrace as much as possible is reusability. We do this with our code, we do this with our art, we do this with all things wherever possible. You make one enemy and then you change the color a little bit, you scale it up a little bit, and you change the hit points and the
Right.
damage, and you've got a second enemy. And I think we can do a lot of that to give the player variety without having to start completely from scratch and say, okay, I need to model 10 different characters. You can model one and tweak it a little bit. And this, sorry, I'm on a bit of a mental tangent here. So this is where Infenzia, I think, our buddy Stefan, who goes by Infenzia on YouTube, we had come join us on our live cast not too long ago. He has his 10-minute Blender modeling videos where he's showing you, here's how I make a bunch of cars or a bunch of people. And you can go through that process of, making one and then duplicate it and then tweak it a little bit and then do it
Right.
again and do it again. So he's like, bam, 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 bam. And he's got 10 of these things that look like they belong in the same universe. They can be walking around together and it's not starting completely from scratch each time you do it. So reuse your stuff as much as possible.
100%. I think that is another barrier. So a lot of times the people think that the barrier is I don't have enough rocks or I don't have enough trees to make a forest or whatever, and so they go and they search and they can't find anything to match their asset packs. But in reality is that they have enough. They just don't think they have enough, right? And if you mess with stuff like trees are a good example. So you can take a tree, you can place it in a scene, and then you can take that same tree and only vertically stretch it down by like 80% and place it in the scene again. And then you take that same tree and rotate it slightly. Then you take that same tree, so let's say it's got a sway animation. You can slow down that sway animation or randomize the sway animation between all the trees, right? So suddenly you do stuff like that, or then you add a slightly different color on one of the trees, right? Like a darker green instead of a lighter green. And if you have 2 or 3 tree models and you do that on every single tree model, you end up with, 15, 20 trees. And then you expand that into a forest and you're good. Like you have plenty of stuff, right? You have plenty of stuff that you need. And it just takes a little bit of resourcefulness, right? Not so much resources, resourcefulness. And I think that's kind of the key ingredient to an indie game, is a little bit of thinking outside the box, right? Of being resourceful with what you got.
Hey Tim, would you be able to go to? I'd do this if you if you'd let me share my screen, but where I can see I don't have that trust level yet. Uh, if you can go to you know what? Are you ready for me to share my screen, or are we not
I
geared
don't
up
I
for
don't
that?
have the video feed, so I don't know how that would work.
Oh, okay,
I might
right.
mess stuff up. We should set that up for next time though.
Okay, next. Okay, fine, fine, Tim Rushwick. If you can go to the RPG Core Combat video. Oh no, just we'll go to GameDev.tv first of all, and then go to the uh, RPG Core Combat. Okay, you got it. And then can you see the promo video on there? Just full
Yeah.
screen that sucker, and then this is the easiest way to be able to kind of demonstrate. Scroll past those two numpties. If you go to kind of about the 1 minute mark,
Okay.
1 minute, 1 minute. Just there. Yeah, pause there. Stop there. There we go. Okay, cool. Wonderful. So that is the early stage of working on the level where we've got some terrain. We've got, I've painted down some texture on the ground, and it's generally showing. Here's what I want the player to see. Here's a path. Here's a river. That's just painting. That's really quick. It's painting the terrain tool, raise and lower. That's quick. We can all do that. Even the programmers out there I've seen, can absolutely do that. And then yeah, young Rick, thank you. And then we've got the painting of the dirt and stuff on the ground and placed in a couple of trees. So this is where a lot of people stop. This is where they get to like, there's my game. There is where, and it looks really not very good. It looks very bland, very unimaginative. There's not a lot of love being put into it. Now, if you scroll back to say trying to find one that's full screenish, maybe the 24-second mark, just scroll back to there. Yeah, so this is after I've put in, a day or two of love into it, where I've gone through, I've got my brush to
Wow,
paint
that's a
down some
difference.
different grass, and I've probably got about 4 or 5 different brushes grasses in there. So I've got the long grass. I'm going to put the long grass along the creek, and then I've got the medium-sized grass. I'm going to scatter that around, and I've got some of the blue clumps. I scatter that around as well. So just getting some grass in there, and then I've gone and put in more props. So I've put in some. Here's a rock. You can see over on the right there, and put in some barrels and some lanterns, and then the lighting pass where we can drop in the light over where the lanterns are, and the overall world I've made darker, and then I've got the lights in there, so it's going to pop a lot more, and a little bit of post-processing and twiddling around with that. But if you have the philosophy of just make it a bit darker and then have some light sources, you can do it that way. And then I've put in just a really easy particle system to have that fairy dust floating around as well. You can see just a little bit of that, so it breaks up the world. And if you click between the two, you can see, I'm not a world-class artist by any stretch, but I just put some time and effort into just splashing some stuff around. I love that you keep going to the picture of me and Ben. Could you stop that, please? Look at that.
Look at how you look at him, Rick.
Yeah, look at it. I'm like, why is his head so stretched and why is my head so squashed? I'm like one of those square, the watermelons you see in Japan that they grow in a box. It's like, $300 for these square watermelons, and he's like some sort of, I don't know, long horse straight. Anyway, so, oh my God, this is being recorded now, isn't it? I'm so used to. No one's ever going to see me saying this stuff, but we're putting on YouTube. Uh, so
He's gonna see
my
it.
point in all of this is that, like, I'm not a world-class artist. I like level design. I've been a professional level designer, but that's from the game design point of view. I haven't been a professional level artist. So I didn't make any of this art. I just placed it. And that's a
Right.
really important thing to do. Look at the space that I've got there around the player. There's enough space so it feels you can easily run along that path, but there's stuff to the side of the player. So it's not there. You look at it
Right.
in that one where it's open. There's too much space. It's empty. It's dull. So you've got to fill up the spaces with things. And just as a good gardener will tell you, you need to have different heights of things. So you need to have the lower things in the foreground and the medium things and the high things. So think of having those different levels of height in your world. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Like I said, just some grass, some extra props to scatter around, some light and change your overall world lighting, and then just some sparkly particles, and you've got something that I think looks nicer.
Yeah, Rick. Do you know if this course covers the post processing stuff?
A little
It's a
bit,
question.
yes.
Okay, a little
Uh,
bit.
um, I definitely cover it in the Complete Unity 3D course, where I go through in the Argon Assault section. I go through post processing.
Okay,
So, um,
that makes sense.
not
Unity 3D.
yeah, in the other one. So, yes, I can see you doing some things on your
Yeah,
screen.
sorry,
That
I'm messing with stuff.
can everyone see that, or just me?
No, everyone can see it. I've got a whole control panel here, but
Wow.
I've got our question thing now. So if we want to answer questions, I can just select them. So
Oh, there's
um,
an actual question thing. Okay,
I'm wondering as a
cool.
question, one of the things I've been contemplating is that special thing for visuals. Like, what would you say makes it look special, flashy, or that makes you go wow? What do you think, Rick? Like, what's the
I think
special
it's
thing?
really important to have something that people can look at. We've talked about this a lot. The 5 second wow. You've got to have a GIF that people look at and go, wow. It doesn't have to be wow because the art looks good. It can be wow because the art looks bad. And not bad as in just you didn't put in an effort, but bad as in, like, why is that character got, his one arm's bigger than the other? That looks weird. Like, it's I wouldn't call Goat Simulator bad art, but it's noteworthy because it's weird and odd, and it's a goat, and things clip through walls, and there's a hilarity to that, I think, in a way. Um, but you've got to find something that visually has it stand out and has people pay attention to it. So what I was going for in the RPG stuff we're looking at just a moment ago was I just wanted it to look fantasy, and I wanted it to look moody, and I wanted it to look like the world was busy and full and interesting. And then
Yeah,
you cast a big old fireball, I probably could make the fireballs bigger. So they're like, what the hell? The old anime is probably the wrong thing, but the whole exaggerated Final Fantasy, the dude's sword is 3 times bigger than he is, and the
Right.
fireballs take up half the screen. So I think we could exaggerate some things some more on that. But you've got to have something that has it pop. You can make your character look odd. You can have things be exaggerated. You can have it you can have it look so super busy you can't see what's going on, or so super empty that it's just one little speck on the screen. You've got to play around with that to find what it is that's unusual about the look, I think.
Yeah. I would say too, I've said this a bunch, but like making your game stand out. So like if your game can be confused with another game by its screenshots, it's probably not where it needs to be art wise, right? Like it should be distinct enough. And I don't think there's any one thing, but I definitely think if you do color palettes and you do stylization really, really well, that's gonna make it look wow and special, right? Especially if you specifically if you pick color palettes that are all very similar shades. Like let's say you made a game where it's all shades of pink, that can be your special thing, right? Like right there, like it's all shades of pink. It
Yep.
looks different than everything else because it's like whoa. And then too, I've seen games that do that, but for different biomes. So they've got like the lava level, which is all black and red, and then they've got the water level, which is all blue and white. And so you can kind of do it more than once. You don't have to stick to that color palette for the whole game, but you can still stylize it enough to make it look interesting to where you're good. I don't think it can be any one thing. I think a good artist and a good game developer knows that whatever you get to choose what that thing is, and you can dial it to 11, as Rick usually says. Like whatever your major thing is, you can bring that to the forefront and make that your special thing, and go all out on it.
Yep. Yeah, I love the getting over it with Bennett Foddy example. It's a guy in a cauldron with a sledgehammer. It's just what the heck. But you look at it and you're like, that's interesting, unusual, great. So play around with that. Instead of having your player just a regular player running around, try having your player you're getting around in your RPG driving a tiny little clown car or one of those miniature bicycles, or that might be hard to animate, or on a magic carpet that they just or a hoverboard, something that isn't going to take a lot of technical expertise. So just going around on a hoverboard and
Yeah.
smacking people on the head with some sort of, I don't know, large broom, that you look at that and you're like, this is just funny and dumb and interesting and exciting. And you might not want to make a silly kind of game like that, so you could have it with a magical underpinning to it, where your character can glide, but you can just learn how to do one animation pose. So it's kind of like, I can do this on video now. That's great. So you kind of like fly through the air like that. I don't
You
know,
can
or
show
or
stuff.
maybe mock something. So maybe your character is running around the world backwards like an Instagram, taking a selfie the whole time. That's how you kind of run around the world. So these are the things that if you allow your mind to just explore a little bit and
Yeah.
and move beyond I just need to make my character be able to shoot. I'm in the code, I'm making it shoot. Okay, now
Yeah.
I can shoot. Okay, my game is great because my character can shoot. Well, every shooting game, the character can shoot. So there's nothing even remotely interesting about that for the player. It's an important part of your game. It's an important mechanic. But if you want it to visually stand out and visually pop, and you're not an artist and you don't have a whole ton of time, just do something that seems wrong to do. So it seemed wrong that he's not going to have a gun. He's going to shoot out of his finger. He's going to run around like that and go pew pew, and actual laser beams come out. That could be cool and interesting and
Right.
and noteworthy and have it stand out. But
Yeah.
that's not going to take a huge amount of time and effort, hopefully, to be able to do that.
Yeah. 100%. I'm with you. We got another question from Gummy that says, which is cheaper for memory, 2D or 3D? It's 2D, but I don't think it's really a concern these days. Like, if you're on the cutting edge of technology and you're trying to throw all of Europe into an Unreal Engine scene, you might have a problem. But, like, other than that, I really don't think it's worth doing it. Like, I picked up an extra 32 gigs of RAM for $120. Like a week or two ago. Like it's not
Yeah.
a big problem anymore. So memory isn't huge. Someone says
There's
monochrome like Return of Obra Dinn. Yeah, that's a really good example too. Like Obra Dinn was completely monochrome, like
Yep.
Game Boy style.
A question from Aniket. Did a question about low poly landscape blender course. Can I follow along using Maya? Probably not, to be honest. I think a lot of the skill in using Maya or Blender is where's the button and how do I do it. So you'd pick up a thing or two, but it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to figure out that. But interestingly, we've talked about doing a Maya course, but you know, Maya is not a free piece of software, so we've assumed that people would be less interested. But if you guys want us to do a Maya course, then just let us know. If there's enough voices, then we'll find an awesome instructor and we'll get a Maya course going. We can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Macy K. Makowski. I can't tell where the word ends and where that word starts. But they ask, do you have any tips or advice on how to get over a creative block when you really don't know how to make environment look structured well and no ideas are coming in?
Copy, 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 copy. Don't steal. Stealing's bad. Don't ever steal. But there's so many things in particular genres of games that are standard or particular looks that are standard. So if you're looking to say the particular question is about how to make the environment look structured, then find a game that's similar to yours. Use your own assets. So there's nothing inappropriate from a copyright point of view about this. You want to be careful about that. But look at the layout that they use. So when we created the RPG course, I did a lot of research and I played games like Torchlight 2. It's very similar to the look and feel. Obviously Diablo, but Diablo I think has a little bit more of a dungeon kind of feel to it, and I wanted to go for a bit more of an outside type feel. Diablo feels like you're on a movie set the whole time. I feel even when you're outside. But Torchlight 2, and then I can look at the flow that they use. Okay, here's the width that they have for their roads. Do I like that? And ask yourself, do you like it? Don't just say I'm going to do it exact. Okay, theirs is in this bit, it's a bit too wide, or in here where you can run around the outside of this whatever, that feels good. So I'm going to put in some small hills where you can't see around the back of the hill. You don't know what's there. I'm going to put some trees on top, and I'm going to have some dead ends the way they do, or I'm going to funnel everyone over a bridge the way they do. So I think when it comes to having the environment look a particular way, then just use as many examples and copy their approach. Copy. I don't like the word copy. What's a better word we can use there, Tim? Instead of saying copy it, like use it for reference.
Reference images. Maybe that's what I was going to say.
Reference. And you see every single artist. You go watch a video on YouTube where an artist is creating something and they're showing you how to do it. Like, okay, let's start with our reference. So I'm going to be drawing a landscape. So I've got some photos of the real world of landscapes, and you can see trees kind of do this and grass does that and hills do this. So reference is really important. If it's just you with your blank canvas from your imagination, it's really difficult, I think, to say where should I put stuff.
And one of my processes and procedures for this is, we're at video now, so I can show this, which is great. Pinterest, that website that seems really weird, and it's like only for people planning weddings. It's actually kind of cool. Okay, so the way that Pinterest...
is this where we're going to see? Oh, you're not logged in. I was
wait,
worried. We're going to see. We're going to see all your knitting. Your crochet boards that you've pinned. Oh, don't show you. Oh no, that's only me who can see it. Can everyone see?
You freaked me out.
Can everyone see your? Oh no.
They can't.
It's already gone live. Oh no, everyone just saw you. Did you stop it? How did that work?
No, no, it's not live. It's good.
Okay. I saw a little bit of it starting to be live.
You can see it.
This is freaking me out. I can see what's on Tim's screen, and then over here I can see what's on the YouTube stream. Tim's there typing his email address. Like.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Where's my boards at? Let me. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know. This is the beauty of doing it live. Okay. So these are my boards, and let me show you some stuff that I've got. So I'm on Pinterest. I'm logged in. Pinterest is kind of stupid because it won't really let you in the website unless you log in. But I keep a bunch of reference images for all kinds of stuff. And Pinterest, the really cool thing about it is you can search whatever you want. So let's say I want a stylized kind of low poly. So low poly
it's
art.
kind of like you're explaining to your elderly mother how to use the internet. All right, you can go to Pinterest and you search for whatever you want.
It's just you can type stuff in. It's crazy. But the cool thing about Pinterest is that some of the stuff matches and some of it doesn't, right? Like I search for low poly. A lot of you guys know what I mean, but Pinterest doesn't necessarily know what I mean. So like this stuff may not be relevant, but like this stuff might, right? So you start to just add this stuff to boards. And then you end up with these boards that are filled with stuff. So I'll show you. This is my aesthetics one. So every time on Pinterest I see a very good aesthetic, like a color palette or something that looks really interesting, I add it to this board. So you see I've got all kinds of interesting colors and unique aesthetics in this board, right? I've just got a bunch of stuff. And it's everything. It's like this deep, like reflective red to like this just black or like, chrome, neon purple and all kinds of stuff. But here's the extra cool part about Pinterest is after you've added a bunch of stuff to your board, you can scroll down to the bottom and it'll start showing you everything on Pinterest that is similar to the images in your board. So you can even, you kind of train it, right? You train it on what to show you. And it's super cool because if you tailor your boards like I do, like I've got color schemes in here, I've got character reference. Character reference is a good one. So I'm making Battleborn Tactics, right, which is a 2D kind of thing, and I've got a bunch of just 2D character silhouettes and all kinds of stuff. So if I ever have any ideas or I'm out of ideas on what to do with characters, I can come in here and just look at all this stuff. And immediately I'm like, okay, look at this. I can have a dude with a cross thing on his chest with a little skull in the middle, right? And it's just an idea, and I could just take that. I'm not necessarily going to copy that, but I'm going to take that idea and put it into a character in Battleborn. Actually, this image right here was what the inspiration on some art that I did for the pirates in my game. I was like, I don't know what that looks like. Let me see if I can see a screenshot of it. I don't have any. No, I don't have any ones with the pirate hats in there. But it was a direct inspiration off of that. And I've got a lot of different like characters and stuff like that. And like I said, once you add a bunch of this stuff in there, Pinterest starts recommending even more stuff. So I usually use this on my iPad. Usually if I'm watching TV or something like that, I'll be going through different arts and aesthetics and stuff like that. And it's a super, super useful tool because it's like an idea generator for me. Like whatever I'm blocked on, character art, environment art, design, aesthetics, even some board game stuff, even ideas for entire games, you can kind of go through. So that's a long answer, but it's definitely it's worth doing it. It's worth looking into for sure. If you especially in the design phase of a game, I think.
Yep.
One of the fun things about Pinterest is seeing what you thought you liked a year or 5 ago and wondering what you were on. Mine's not based around like what I like. It's kind of based just around concepts. So I've got like 2D characters. I've got like card game stuff. I've got icons, iconography, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's also really important to ask other people what they think about your game. If you're trying to make it look good and it's just you looking at it day in, day out, after a short amount of time, you're going to stop seeing things. So we're mentioning Stefan before, Infenzia on YouTube, and he's recently released his game Line War, and Tim and I have been playing it a little bit
of it.
Played a little bit. And we won't talk about who's the current champion.
It's not me.
It's not you. But it's one of the two of us. And looking at it, the very first thing we saw was, well, obviously when you first jump into a game, you have a certain, you see certain things. Oh, these low poly characters are pretty cool, and I like here's a big map and world and stuff. What I saw was the very blurry maybe you can get a screenshot of this, Tim. The very blurry kind of map, the terrain for me looked a bit kind of like a low res image that had been stretched. And I saw that and it kind of bugged me a little bit. But now after playing the game a bit, I don't see it at all. Don't notice it, don't care about it whatsoever. I'm like, okay, that's a forest, that's a mountain, that's the ground. And my gaming brain has moved on beyond that. I think that image there even looks, I think that's been touched up. That looks better than it looks in the actual game, to be honest.
Yeah, looks, you know what? We could pull up the actual game. Hold on.
Oh, that's crazy, crazy talk.
Crazy technology here. Look at us.
Look at us streaming an actual game. Yeah, we should just play the
No,
actual
we
game.
shouldn't because I don't need to be exploited like that on
Yeah,
stream.
exactly.
Because
Exactly.
you find out what hurts and then hit me there, and it's not very nice of you.
I'm sorry about that, Tim. Sorry, not sorry. Um, and so the point I was making there is that what they're doing really well is they're getting a lot of feedback. They're listening to people. They've got their, it's in demo mode at the moment on Steam, so the game is playable. But there's the expectation it's going to change a bunch. And if enough people get there and say, hey, I think you should really work on this aspect or that aspect, then you pay attention to that. So it's super, super important to listen to people, to get input, to get feedback. You could go to Sandbox, I think.
Oh, okay.
That allows you to just and then dive in. So I guarantee that after this time, Stefan's been working on this for a couple of years. He's been playing it for quite some time himself. I'm pretty sure he doesn't see these things anymore because for him in his mind, it's like, I think it's fine. And he's worrying about so many other things. So don't watch the tutorial. No.
Yeah, but I see what you mean. Like, it doesn't look super high res.
I mean, looking at it now, I'm like, it's fine because I've seen it enough. I kind of don't care anymore. I don't care the mountain. Like the mountains, something about them looks a little bit too blurred. And he might say, well, that's deliberate because we don't want the mountains visually. We want the units to pop over the top of the mountain. So you don't have any units in there yet. But that might be, that might be part of the game plan. So it's all good. But that's the conversation you need to be having. That's the feedback you need to be getting. Don't try to do all this on your own. And the best way, this is my market research brain talking here, because I worked in market research for a long time, is when you're saying to people, should I do this or should I do that? You need to select somewhere a long way away.
I don't know what I'm
doing. When you're saying, is this the right approach for me to take? What you need to do is show them options. Here's option A and option B. So people are like, oh, option B is a lot better. If you just show them this, what we're looking at right now, and say, what do you think? They'll be like, it's all right. I don't like the mountains. You're like, well, what about it? I don't know. I just don't like them. But if you say mountain A or mountain B for the texture, then people can look at it and give you that input, that feedback. So I think that's important. And so the 2 points I was making there, one is after a while, you don't even see these things yourself when you're working on your game. So constantly be getting feedback from people. And the other thing is when you're showing them, when you're trying to get feedback on it, it's great to have options or alternatives or to guide them more than just saying, what do you think? What do you think can get you certain good answers? But when it comes to your art style, it's better to say, what if we go with this all pink monochromatic approach or this super saturated, vibrant fantasy daytime approach? Which of those do you think is more appropriate for this game or has more of a wow factor to it?
Yeah, 100% agree. Gummy asks, any tips on communicating your vision with your artist? Yes, I have 2 tips. One, if you have a really good artist, I would consider letting them dictate a little bit of your vision. I do see that a lot. Really good artists get bogged down with game developers that have a little bit of an ego, and they tell them to do something completely out of their style, when if you just gave the artist a little bit of freedom, they could make something interesting. So that's part one. The other part of it is if you really need to dictate like what you want to your artist, the best way to do that is an artist brief. And if you don't know what an artist brief is, basically you can make a PowerPoint slide and you can just show them reference images of all the stuff that you want, right? So it's like you create a PowerPoint slide that says, I want tanks, but then you actually include screenshots and relevant games and design choices and styles and colors in that PowerPoint slide and just say, I want these types of tanks. I want 7 of these types of tanks, right? So be as clear as possible. If you can get an asset list down, if you can get specific style, and actually in the PowerPoint you can draw text and stuff over it, but like be specific. I like this kind of low poly style. I don't like this kind of low poly style, right? I like the polygonal style. I don't like the blocky style, for example.
Yep.
As specific as you can get. And if you can get an artist brief out like that, your communication will be 10,000 times better than like any person that just says, "Oh, make me some tanks," and then upset that the tanks don't look like you want them to, right?
Reference art goes a massive way, and I think also communicating the mood or the feeling goes a long way as well. So if you get there and say, I want my game to feel, super realistic, immersive, you're right there in the middle of war, you're scared for your life kind of thing, then the artist's like, okay, I'll work on that. But if you get there and say, I want it to feel, fun and happy and light and carefree and whatever, then the artist can use that as well. So the reference, but then also the mood and the feeling, I think is very useful.
Yeah, and all that should be in the artist brief. The mood, the feel, the colors. And if you don't know the colors, like list that, tell them that, work with them. I would even have a consultation. Don't just... That's another one of those things that doing it completely over text is... I tried to do that with a sound designer one time. I was like, and I actually found myself typing, just make it like a boom boom sound. And he's like, what does that mean? Like,
what? You mean like a boom boom or like a boom boom?
Exactly. Like communication.
I can see you getting on a phone call and like, make it like a boom boom sound. Like, oh, now I understand that's really super duper clear now.
But you know what? With my musician for Battleborn, one of the things that I did was I got on the voice chat with him. I was like, okay, make it go like this, and like I made the sounds with my mouth, and it actually worked pretty well to like describe the like actual things versus like in text. But that's one of those audio things too. It doesn't necessarily apply to art, but
yep.
Useful to look at someone's itch page and give thoughts on how to improve things. Maybe we can do that one day. We can give feedback on people's pages and stuff. Maybe we'll make a discussion out of that.
Yes, we can do that. I love this format. Like we were dabbling with video and stream and did some Twitch stuff for a while, but it just ended up being a better discussion when we're on Discord. But I think going back to video, I think is going to be great. So many things we can do.
Yeah, we can have a lot more visual aids to show what we're talking about.
And what questions do you guys have? Those folks who are watching at the moment, got any questions? Let us know. Questions about whatever, about your game, but the aesthetics, the art style, but also about game development in general. Unity versus Unreal, it doesn't matter. Do either, whatever floats your boat. They're both amazing.
Construct 3.
Oh my goodness.
It's the greatest. Godot's picking up steam too. I gotta get back into Godot.
Do you know, whenever I see the actress who plays Wonder Woman, Gal
Godot.
I don't want to ruin the punchline of the story, but yeah, when I read it, I'm like, oh, it's Gal Gadot, because that's how I pronounce the engine, the game engine, Godot. And then she'll say, I'm Gal Gadot. I'm like, no, that's not right. That's not how you pronounce it. But maybe the engine should be pronounced the way she pronounces her name, because
I always
she's
pronounce
legit.
it Godot just to piss people off. It's fun.
Godot, yeah, Godotty.
Yeah. We got a question. Will you be doing another marketing live event? I missed the last one.
Yeah, why not?
Maybe.
Should do.
We'll see.
I reckon we should.
Maybe one day. It'll be secret. We're exploring that area currently, so we'll have details in the future.
What other questions do you folks have at the moment? Hopefully everyone can see the chat and can ask questions or put comments in there. Thank you, everyone, for keeping it civil and professional, as always.
Why there is no Godot course?
There was, but it was in Godot. It was in the previous version, and it was becoming a bit old and out of date. Yeah. So we parked it, And if anyone knows a good Godot instructor who they think, you know what, this person's pretty cool, I like them, I've seen a couple of videos of theirs on YouTube or wherever they might be hanging out, and they think that we should team up, then please do make an introduction. Or if you're sitting there and you're like, I know how to use Godot and I've always wanted to do some instructing, then hit us up. Always happy. We're always looking for people who are the right kind of instructors to join the team, people who have a passion for educating others and have a passion for that level of quality that we try to put into all of our courses. So it's not just I'm doing a thing, watch along, but it's actual learning. People can get somewhere going through that process.
Brian wants to know who's your favorite teaching assistant.
All of them, Brian. All of my children are my favorites. Yeah. Who's my favorite teaching assistant? So who's my favorite RPG teaching assistant? Easily Brian. Easily. He's definitely in the top 3 RPG teaching assistants that we've got. Right up there.
Are we going to Game Developers Conference 2022?
2020. Hasn't that come and gone?
It's
when
like
is
next
that
week.
Next week. I wish, but
No,
maybe
not.
next year. Maybe we'll do something next year.
Someone does. They then ask, what are thoughts on developer conferences? I think they're great for networking and promotion and stuff like that. I think the vast majority of people that are into game development as a hobby or something, it just wouldn't make any financial sense at all to go. It's expensive. San Francisco's expensive. You don't really all the good talks end up on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like it's not really like worth it as like an indie developer unless you're going to meet with a bunch of people. And that's the thing is if you are going to meet with a bunch of people, you can usually do that outside the conference. They're all hanging out in bars. They're all hanging out in like the little park right there next to the conference center. Like you can meet up with plenty of people. A lot of people just go to San Francisco because everybody's there. They don't necessarily even go to the conference. So, meh.
Yeah, I love it. I've been to GDC, a few times, and I like it because of the networking and meeting friends I haven't seen for a while. From an indie point of view, you really need to have a goal. So if you've got your game and it's ready, you're shopping, you're looking for a publisher, you're looking for media, looking for press. Maybe you're looking for a partnership, someone to team up with. You're looking to hire people. If you've got a reason to go there, it's good. I don't think the education aspect of conferences are often very good at all because it's a lot of people who are there to sell themselves. Let me give you a talk about why my game was amazing and you should buy it. Or let me give you a talk about what we learned in our studio and why you should come work for us. So, there are some really good nuggets of knowledge in there as well. People who are giving you like, here's exactly what I learned or I know. But as Tim says, a lot of those end up online anyway. So the real value is if you can go and speak to that presenter afterwards, like mob them the way everyone mobs them and be like, hey, you mentioned that you do X, Y, Z. I've always wondered, is X more important or Y more important? And what are the percentages? And they, 20% X and 30% Y. I'm like, great, thanks. Now I can go off. Like you've answered the question that I know I would never be able to kind of track you down and ask that question. So thank you. So there's some value, but it's a good chance to get out of the office if you work in an office and, go to some parties. That's kind of a little bit of it.
Yeah. If you are an indie and you're looking to promo your game or stuff like that, GDC is probably not the place to be. But it could be a place to meet publishers, for example. You know what I mean? Like I know when I was there, they had Sony was lining up publishing meetings and you could meet with Sony just like they're meeting with one person after the other. Like they just do it like all day. So that kind of stuff, it makes a whole lot of sense. But something like PAX is way better for showcasing your game because you can get part of a booth like Indie Mega Booth or stuff like that for a little bit cheaper. And it's all gamers, not game devs. So it's a lot better for marketing. You can meet a lot of journalists, which is one of the main values there, right? Like you can actually talk to the journalist. And when you email them, they're like, oh, yeah, you're that guy I met, not just some random person that emailing them. So
yeah,
it goes a long way with that, with kind of relationships and stuff.
Yes. Question from Morb. Oh, you've got a question? No. From Morbo Annihilator. Have you looked into a course of Unity with Playmaker? I was really interested in Playmaker back in my earlier days of playing with Unity. I think it's a great tool. we're currently, it's secret, don't tell anyone, it's top secret. And I always like to preface these things just in case there's a hiccup and it doesn't end up reaching the light of day. But we're currently working on a Unity Bolt course, so that's visual scripting. I think Playmaker is a different sort of visual scripting or visual coding. I think Bolt is very, very useful because it parallels very closely C sharp. And I think it's also, Bolt is very, very similar to Blueprints in Unreal. So there's a little bit of interchangeability there. If you start to figure out Bolt, then maybe that's a good workflow. If you switch to Unreal one day, then you're already sort of familiar with that way of doing things. Obviously the languages are different and the particular code's going to be different. So yeah, I like visual scripting. I think it's great. Big fan. But Bolt rather than Playmaker is what's on our horizon at the moment.
I've used Bolt a little bit, and between Bolt and what's the Pro Builder, you can do a lot of stuff, right? Like I just popped in Unity and just started messing with stuff and didn't have to leave the application, which was pretty cool.
Yes. Yep. Awesome.
When is a good time to stop adding micro details to your environment? I'm always getting hung up on tiny details that most people wouldn't even notice or walk straight by. At some point, you've got to say enough is enough and finalize it, right? I that's one of the biggest struggles with indie game development. Is like there's so much stuff to work on, and there's really no kind of producer pushing it out the door. So deadlines are important, and a lot of times like perfect is not what's shippable, and like you got to get it to just like a shippable state if you want to, at least if you want to launch the game, right, commercially. So I tend to go with like kind of 90% perfection. That's like my little term for it, of like it's go with good enough is kind of, but determining what good enough is kind of complicated. So I would say when people give you feedback and they stop picking out kind of environment details and stuff like that, that's usually a good sign that, hey, maybe your environment's fine, right? But if they keep saying, oh, this looks weird or that doesn't, you might still need some work on there. Generally, the way that I usually end up stop working on stuff, because I'm very perfectionist when it comes to that stuff, is I will write everything down in like Trello. I'll prioritize all of my tasks and all of my art stuff, and generally tweaking the environment, for example, ends up as a lower priority than fixing the shooting bug or whatever. And then I never end up getting to tweaking to the environment because prioritization stuff just keeps piling up on top, and then it's the deadline, and then it's launch day, and then, oh, okay, we didn't get to that. But that's probably the easiest way that I've found to prioritize, is just have, or to leave it at 90%, is to have other stuff that's a higher priority, if that makes sense.
Yep. So a question from Jordan, it's about Bolt as well. For dev skill level 0 to 10, is there a skill level for Bolt, meaning your skill is 6 out of 10? You should code regular, as there is not a benefit. It's really interesting, I think, the whole visual scripting stuff. The more you understand programming concepts, the more you can just use any language. So if you understand about the fundamentals of setting up an array and then using, a while loop to do whatever with that array, then you've got that as a concept. And it doesn't really matter whether you're, in C# or C++ or JavaScript or in visual scripting or Bolt or Blueprints. You've got those concepts, and you're basically just looking for, okay, where do I put the syntax? How do I drag the line to be able to do this? So I think if you're scared of programming, then a visual scripting start is great, because then you can just absorb the concept without being scared about, what do those symbols mean? It's a little box that says, I'm a variable, and then you drag a line over to this little box that says I need to get a variable. And you're like, cool, I understand that conceptually that makes sense. I'm a visual learner. And so visual scripting, I think, is great for people who are more visual learners, and getting into the code is great for people who have more of that analytical. I just need it to be exact, and I want to be able to see the flow, and I need to connect that to that to there. So I think Bolt and Blueprints, by the same kind of visual scripting inclusivity, they have the same benefit for people who are visual scripters, people who are a bit scared of the code. But I think you can go from one to the other. I personally believe you can go from learning Bolt and then jumping into actual C sharp, and vice versa, C sharp back to Bolt. And both of those are going to improve your skills as a game developer and as a programmer. You're not going to, I personally don't see that you're gonna have bad habits that you're gonna be confused by
Right.
if you go from visual scripting to coding, because you're learning the flow is the same. The flow you're using in Bolt is the same as the flow
Yeah.
you're using if you're typing in C sharp.
One thing I would add to that, Rick, is there's actually some scenarios where it makes sense to use both as well.
Yeah.
I find that programming, for example, procedural environments, if I'm like generating procedural maps and stuff, code makes a lot more sense because there's a lot of like really complex, tedious math of like rotate this 90 degrees and then attach it to this arm and all that stuff. But AI, for example, I find so much easier to look at visually, like behavior trees and stuff like that. Like if you have this behavior over here and then they go down to this behavior over here. So I've found a good mix because Construct 3 is a visual scripting engine, but they also have just a year or two ago released JavaScript, so you can code in JavaScript. And I was using all visual scripting for that. And I've been making games since I was 16. I'm like 33 now, so that's quite a long time. And it's not necessarily a skill level thing with me. It's just that like that stuff tends to work better. And I find that JavaScript, even though I can code in it, and I know plenty of programming languages to be able to do that, I only tend to code the hardcore like procedural generation stuff. And the rest of the stuff, especially like AI behavior trees and stuff like that, I kind of leave to the visual scripting because it's easier to understand in that format, if that makes sense.
So we'll take one or two more questions, then we should wrap her up. Question from Stasis Field. You've coded something on Friday, for instance, come back Monday and go, what the heck did I code? What advice would you give for that hurdle, especially when bugs start happening? I mean, the absolute best thing you can do is make sure everything's named well. And so I think that's the fundamental. If you name your functions specifically what they're doing and you name your variables specifically what they relate to, then I think it's going to go a long way to knowing what's going on. Also, having clean code where you're not pointing, you're not having, okay, so if you've got, say the player does player things. So the player says, I'm going to decide to shoot. Okay, so I'm going to say, go do some shooting right now. Then you can go to the player and you can figure out, okay, why are things not shooting correctly? If you have the enemy is responsible for making the player's bullet shoot at the enemy and hit them, then you're going to be confused by, okay, the player's shooting and killing the enemy. I've got a problem with the bullet being shot. I should be looking at the player, and you might forget that it's actually the enemy that's responsible for the bullet behavior. So you want to have the player's responsible for what the player does, and the bullet's responsible for what the bullet does, and the enemy is responsible for what the enemy does. I think, that's a very, very high level simplification of making sure that you've got your code set up in a way where the things belong in. If you come back in a month, it's in the place where it belongs, and you don't have this random thing that you have to scroll down in your inspector to find, oh, it's buried way down in there. So name it well and put it in the right place, and I think you're halfway there.
I've taken that to the extreme too. Like I used to cut corners with like function and method names of like, shoot enemy or whatever. But I now prefer longer, very specific function method names versus like shorter ones that are a little more generic or vague, specifically because of that. Like just even if they're like this long, like they explain exactly what they do, and it's a lot easier to read.
People with variables called I or variables called T, it's like, don't, like, that T stands for time, but in a month time, are you going to know T stands for time? And particularly when you've got another thing in your code which is about target, and something else which is about trajectory, and something else which is about timing versus time. So yeah, call it time until explodes. Don't just call it time.
Right. Yeah. And it takes a fraction of a second more to type that out, but it's so worth it in the long-term readability of stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. So I think that's pretty good. Any concluding comments for making things look good today, Tim?
No, I think. How'd you guys like video? How'd everybody like it? Do we like this better than Discord audio? Because now it's got the advantage of that kind of stuff. We were able to show a lot more stuff, I think, this time around.
Yeah.
Which we couldn't show anything in audio, but
Yeah, it's interesting because some folks might be sitting there like, well, I'm on my phone and I can't see it so well. So I don't, I'd prefer before I just have my headphones in, or someone who's sitting there playing a game at the same time. I know there's been someone who's been doing that. If you got two monitors, not a problem, but I guess you don't have to look at what we're showing on the screen. You can still just listen to us.
yeah. I tried every time I showed something, I tried to describe it so we can still use these as audio if we want to.
Right.
But,
Oh, I didn't do that. Thanks for doing that, Tim. That's very good.
That's why I was controlling my screen.
Yeah, I got it. That's why I don't get to share my screen. I see. I see what's going on here.
Yeah, but I think the audio. This is actually one of our more successful technical streams. We didn't have any hiccups or any kind of glitches. We had an echo in the beginning, but other than that, worked out well. Cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate you being here. Thank you, Rick, for hanging out.
Always a pleasure, Tim.
And we will see you all next Tuesday. We've got another special guest, 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right back here on YouTube, and it'll be fun. Bye, everybody.
Awesome. See you later.